Something extraordinary happened on a summer morning in 1953. Padre Pio was praying in the small chapel when suddenly he stopped mid-prayer, his eyes fixed on something invisible to everyone else. The other friars noticed how his scarred hands began to tremble, not with pain, but with what seemed like recognition. Later, he would tell his spiritual director, "I saw him, the Matamoros. St. James was there, and he showed me the 3 keys that unlock impossible paths." What Padre Pio witnessed that morning would change how he guided souls for the rest of his life. Because St. James didn't just appear to comfort him, he came with a mission: to reveal the 3 specific actions that make demons flee and cause heaven to intervene in human affairs. 3 things, not 2, not 10, exactly 3. And when a soul does these 3 things on July 25th, the feast of St. James, something breaks in the spiritual realm, like ice cracking under the weight of spring water. Today is July 25th. And if you're hearing this message, it's no coincidence. Because somewhere in the unseen world, St. James the Greater, the first apostle to shed his blood for Christ, the warrior who appears on white horses in spiritual battles, is preparing to ride into your situation. But he needs you to open the door. He needs you to do the 3 things that Padre Pio saw, understood, and taught to desperate souls for decades. Do you have a path that seems permanently blocked? A prayer that feels like it never reaches heaven? A family situation that grows worse despite your efforts? Then stay until the end, because today might be the day everything changes. Write in the comments right now, "St. James, open my path, and let heaven know you're ready to receive what's coming." St. James wasn't just any apostle, he was fire incarnate. When Jesus called him and his brother John sons of thunder, it wasn't because they spoke softly. These were men who wanted to call down lightning from heaven to destroy entire cities that rejected their master. They had a holy violence, a sacred fury that burned against injustice and evil. And when James became the first apostle to die for Christ, spilling his blood in Jerusalem around 44 AD, heaven gave him something special: the authority to break spiritual chains. Padre Pio understood this like few others. He could see into the spiritual realm as clearly as you and I see the morning sky. And what he saw about St. James was extraordinary. This wasn't just a saint who intercedes quietly from heaven. This was a warrior who descends to fight alongside those who call upon him with genuine faith. The mystical body of Christ has generals, and James is one of them. But here's what most people miss, and what Padre Pio emphasized over and over. Saints don't just respond to wishful thinking. They respond to action, to decision, to souls who are willing to do what it takes. And when it comes to St. James, there are 3 specific actions that activate his intercession, like keys turning in ancient locks. The first key is what Padre Pio called confession that tears veils. Not just any confession. Not the kind we make out of habit or obligation, rushing through a list of faults without real sorrow. But confession that reaches the core, that acknowledges the root, that doesn't just touch the surface of sin, but digs deep into the soil where spiritual bondage takes root. Listen, dear soul, and this is crucial. Most of our blocked paths aren't blocked by circumstances. They're blocked by spiritual debris, unforgiven sins, unhealed wounds, unrepented patterns that give the enemy legal ground in our lives. When Padre Pio looked at people, he could see these spiritual tangles like cobwebs covering a person's destiny. But before we continue with this profound teaching, I want to share something that can deepen your understanding of Padre Pio's spiritual wisdom. I've prepared a special guide called The Power of the Rosary with Padre Pio, Miracles, Protection, and Divine Graces. This isn't just another religious booklet. It's a collection of Padre Pio's most powerful teachings about prayer, spiritual warfare, and how to access the supernatural help that heaven wants to give you. In these pages, You'll discover the specific prayers Padre Pio used when facing impossible situations, the mysteries of the Rosary that he said could shake hell itself, and testimonies of people whose lives were completely transformed by following his guidance. If you want to experience the kind of spiritual breakthrough that makes saints like James take notice, this guide will show you exactly how Padre Pio did it. Look for the link in the description, and let this be another step in opening your spiritual path. Now, back to that first key, confession that tears veils. There was a woman named Sarah who came to Padre Pio in desperation. Her teenage son had been involved with drugs for 3 years. Her marriage was crumbling. Her faith was hanging by a thread. She had confessed her sins regularly, but nothing changed. Padre Pio looked at her with those penetrating eyes and said, "My daughter, you confess your actions, but you haven't confessed your heart. You haven't wept for the pride that built walls between you and your family. You haven't mourned the bitterness that poisoned your home." That day, Sarah made what she later called the confession that broke everything open. She didn't just list her sins, she mourned them. She didn't just ask for forgiveness, she begged for transformation. She stayed in that confessional until her heart felt raw and empty and clean. Within 2 weeks, her son came home. Within a month, her husband asked to start over. Within 3 months, their home was filled with peace they hadn't known in years. Coincidence? Never. Because when a soul purifies itself completely, heaven takes notice. And St. James, who gave everything for Christ, intercedes powerfully for those who are willing to give everything in return. Don't postpone what could open your path today. Find a priest. Make that confession. Today is July 25th. Let it be the day your spiritual chains break. The second key that Padre Pio saw in his vision of St. James is what he called the Militant Rosary, not the automatic rosary. Not the distracted rosary you pray while doing dishes or scrolling through your phone, but the rosary wielded like a sword, gripped like a shield, fired like arrows straight into the heart of spiritual darkness. Here's something most Catholics don't realize. Padre Pio prayed 15 complete rosaries every single day. 15. When people asked him how he found the time, he would smile and say, "You ask me how I find time for my weapon. I should ask you how you find time to live without yours." For Padre Pio, the rosary wasn't devotion, it was warfare, and St. James understood this perfectly. Historical chronicles tell us that during the great battles of medieval times, Christian soldiers reported seeing a warrior on a white horse fighting alongside them, his sword flashing like lightning, cutting through enemy lines with supernatural strength. They called him Santiago Matamoros, St. James the Moor Slayer. But here's what they didn't record in those ancient texts. In many of those same battles, Christian armies were praying the rosary as they fought. The connection isn't coincidental. When you pray the rosary with intention, with focus, with the understanding that each Hail Mary is a strike against evil, you're calling down the same warrior who appeared to Padre Pio in 1953. You're activating the same spiritual artillery that has toppled kingdoms of darkness for centuries. But listen carefully. There's a specific way to pray the rosary that opens spiritual doors. Padre Pio taught that each mystery isn't just something to think about, it's something to enter. When you pray the joyful mysteries, you don't just remember the Annunciation. You place yourself in that room with Mary, feeling her surprise, her fear, her ultimate surrender. When you pray the sorrowful mysteries, you don't just think about the crucifixion. You kneel at the foot of the cross, letting the reality of Jesus' sacrifice tear your heart open. This is the difference between a routine rosary and a militant rosary. One goes through the motions, the other goes to war. Every Ave Maria becomes a battering ram against the gates of hell. Every Hail Mary full of grace becomes a proclamation that grace is still available, still flowing, still powerful enough to transform any situation. Every Holy Mary, Mother of God, becomes a reminder that the woman who said yes to the impossible is still saying yes for you today. Do you want to see changes in your life? Do you want to witness St. James ride into your circumstances with his spiritual sword drawn? Then commit to the Rosary today, not just today, but every day. Not just as a prayer, but as an act of war against everything that opposes God's will for your life. Here's what I want you to do right now. Before this day ends, find your rosary. If you don't have one, use your fingers. Begin with the sorrowful mysteries. Let the suffering of Christ remind you that your suffering has meaning too. Pray each Hail Mary slowly, deliberately, as if your life depends on it, because in the spiritual realm, it does. And as you pray, picture St. James on his white horse, charging ahead of you, cutting through the spiritual opposition that has kept your prayers from being answered, your paths from opening, your miracles from manifesting. See him wielding his sword in one hand and his rosary in the other, because the greatest warriors of heaven know that the most powerful weapon isn't made of steel, it's made of prayer. When you finish that rosary tonight, you'll feel something different, a lightness, a clarity, a sense that something has shifted in the unseen world. That's St. James responding to your militant prayer. That's heaven taking notice of your spiritual warfare. Don't pray just one rosary today. If possible, pray 3, one for your family, one for your needs, one for the conversion of hearts that seem impossible to reach. Because when the enemy sees a soul armed with the rosary, calling upon St. James on his feast day, he knows his time is running out. The third key that Padre Pio received in his mystical encounter with St. James is the most challenging of all. It's also the most powerful. He called it love that hides from human eyes, but shines like fire in the courts of heaven. This is charity done in secret, kindness offered without witnesses, love given without credit or recognition. Here's where most people stumble. We want miracles, but we're stingy with mercy. We cry out for God's intervention, but we withhold our own intervention in the lives around us. We beg heaven to notice our needs while we ignore the needs of our neighbors. But St. James, the same man who wanted to call down fire from heaven, learned something profound about the nature of divine power. It flows through hidden channels. Think about James's life before he became an apostle. He was a fisherman, which meant he understood currents. He knew that the strongest currents often run deep, invisible to those looking only at the surface. When Jesus called him to become a fisher of men, James discovered that the same principle applies in the spiritual realm. The love that changes the world moves beneath the surface, in secret acts that no one sees except God. Padre Pio lived this truth every day. Yes, he had the stigmata, the bleeding wounds that made him famous. Yes, people traveled from around the world to see him, but his most powerful miracles didn't happen in public. They happened in the confessional, in private conversations, in letters he wrote to struggling souls, in small acts of kindness that nobody photographed or recorded. He would often say, one hidden act of charity can save more souls than 1,000 sermons, and he proved it over and over again. When people came to him asking for miracles, he rarely told them to pray more or fast longer. Instead, he would say, go find someone who needs what you need and give it to them, then watch what God does. Let me tell you about Michael, a businessman who was facing bankruptcy. His company was failing, his employees were losing hope, and his family was under tremendous stress. He came to Padre Pio desperate for a financial miracle. Padre Pio listened to his story, then asked a simple question. When was the last time you helped someone financially? Michael was confused. Father, I can't help anyone. I'm the one who needs help. Padre Pio smiled. And my son, heaven's economics work differently than earth's economics. You want God to pour into your empty cup, but your cup has a hole in the bottom. That hole is selfishness. Plug it with generosity and watch what happens. That same week, despite his desperate financial situation, Michael secretly paid the rent for an elderly neighbor who was facing eviction. He took money from his emergency fund, money he couldn't afford to lose, and left it anonymously in her mailbox. He told no one. He asked for no recognition. He simply acted out of the love that Padre Pio had stirred in his heart. Within 10 days, Michael received a call from a potential investor he had contacted months earlier and forgotten about. The man wanted to not only invest in Michael's company, but to become a full partner. Within 3 months, the business was not only saved, but thriving. Michael never told anyone about the connection between his secret gift and his unexpected blessing, but he knew. Heaven had responded to his hidden charity with visible grace. This is how St. James operates. He fought visible battles with an invisible weapon, love. He conquered territories not just with his sword, but with his service. The Chronicles tell us about his battles, but they don't tell us about the countless acts of kindness he performed as he traveled through the lands he was evangelizing. Today, right now, before this day ends, find someone who needs what you need. If you need financial provision, provide for someone else financially, even in a small way. If you need healing, care for someone who is sick. If you need forgiveness, forgive someone who has hurt you. If you need love, love someone who seems unlovable. Do it in secret. Tell no one. Seek no credit. Let it be between you and heaven. Then watch how St. James responds to your hidden charity with public miracles, because the love that no one sees is the love that moves the invisible world. Now here's where the real power emerges. Padre Pio didn't just see 3 separate actions in his vision of St. James. He saw them working together like gears in a cosmic machine, each one amplifying the power of the others. When confession purifies the soul, the rosary becomes more potent. When the rosary is prayed with a clean heart, acts of hidden charity flow naturally. And when all 3 operate together, something extraordinary happens in the spiritual realm. Think of it like this. Confession is the key that opens the door. The rosary is the light that illuminates the path. And secret charity is the bridge that carries you across. But when you use all 3 keys on the same day, especially on July 25th, the feast of St. James, you're not just opening a door or crossing a bridge. You're activating what Padre Pio called the full authority of heaven. Here's the specific sequence that Padre Pio recommended for maximum spiritual impact. First, make a thorough confession, holding nothing back, mourning not just your sins, but the patterns behind them. This clears the spiritual atmosphere around your life, removing the interference that blocks heaven's signals. Then immediately afterward, pray a complete rosary with total focus, seeing each mystery as a doorway into the heart of God. This establishes a direct line of communication with the supernatural world. Finally, within 24 hours of your confession and rosary, perform an act of secret charity that costs you something real. Not spare change, not leftover time, but something that requires sacrifice. This demonstrates to heaven that your prayer isn't just about receiving, it's about becoming a channel through which God's love can flow to others. When these 3 actions combine, they create what spiritual directors call a perfect storm of grace. The confession removes obstacles, the rosary calls down power, and the charity proves your sincerity. It's like creating the perfect conditions for lightning to strike. And St. James, the son of thunder, knows exactly how to direct that lightning into your circumstances. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't magic, and it's not manipulation. You can't use these 3 keys to force God's hand or guarantee specific outcomes. What you can do is position yourself in the flow of divine grace, align yourself with heaven's agenda, and demonstrate that you're serious about spiritual transformation. The signs that St. James is responding to your three-key prayer are usually subtle at first. You might notice that obstacles that seemed permanent suddenly become movable. Conversations that have been impossible for years suddenly become possible. Doors that have been locked tight begin to creak open, just enough for you to see light on the other side. People often ask Padre Pio how long it takes to see results after using these three keys. His answer was always the same: God works outside of time, but faith works inside of obedience. Keep doing the three things and keep watching for God to move. Sometimes the miracle is immediate, sometimes it's gradual. But when a soul truly surrenders through confession, warfare through the Rosary, and love through charity, heaven always responds. Today is July 25th. Today is St. James's Day. Today, these three keys have special power because you're not just praying to a saint, you're joining a feast, participating in a celebration that all of heaven is observing. When you confess today, you're confessing on the day when St. James's intercession is strongest. When you pray the Rosary today, you're praying with the full attention of the warrior saint. When you perform secret charity today, you're offering it on the altar of his feast. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't postpone until you feel more ready. The enemy wants you to delay because he knows that spiritual momentum is real, and today's momentum is extraordinary. Find a priest for confession. Find your rosary for warfare. Find someone who needs love for charity. Use all three keys today. Watch what St. James does in response. Because when heaven sees a soul that's serious about spiritual breakthrough, heaven responds with breakthrough power. The path that has been blocked is about to open. The prayer that seemed unheard is about to be answered. The miracle you've been waiting for is about to unfold. Dear soul who has listened to this message, you now hold something precious in your hands. Not just information, but revelation. Not just knowledge, but keys. The same three keys that Padre Pio saw when St. James appeared to him on that extraordinary morning in 1953. Confession that tears, veils, and breaks spiritual chains. The Militant Rosary that wages war against darkness. Secret charity that moves the very heart of God. These aren't just spiritual exercises. They're weapons of divine warfare, tools of supernatural transformation, bridges between your current reality and the miracle that heaven has prepared for you. Today is July 25th. Today is your day. Today, St. James rides from the courts of heaven with his sword drawn and his heart burning with desire to open the path that has been closed in your life. But he cannot ride alone. He needs you to ride with him. He needs you to take action. He needs you to use the keys. Before this day ends, find a confessor. Pour out your heart completely, holding nothing back. Then take your rosary and pray it like your life depends on it, because in the spiritual realm, it does. Finally, find someone who needs what you need and give it to them in secret, expecting nothing in return except the joy of participating in God's love. Write in the comments, I will use the three keys today. Declare it, proclaim it, let heaven hear your commitment. And share this message with someone who needs hope, because you might be the instrument St. James uses to change another life. May St. James ride before you, opening every blocked path. May Padre Pio intercede beside you, strengthening your faith. And may the Blessed Virgin Mary cover you with her mantle of protection as you step boldly into the miracle that God has prepared. You are not alone. You are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. Today, heaven wants to open your path. Today, St. James draws his sword in your defense. Today, everything can change. Go now and use the keys. Your breakthrough is waiting.